Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Cash for College FAFSA 101 Beginner. I am Samara Angel, and I am the Strategy Manager for Post-Secondary Access here at Alabama Possible. We today are here to talk about the financial aid concepts for completing the FAFSA. We're really focused today on student applications. For we have this would be kind of like a two-parter. So we definitely encourage you all to register for our advanced FAFSA webinar that will happen later in November. We would like to go ahead and thank our sponsors and recognize them who make it possible for us to host these webinars for you at no charge. We would also like to thank our partners, the Alabama Commission on Higher Education, the Alabama Community College System, the Alabama State Department of Education, and the Get Educated, which is the Common Black College Application. Just some housekeeping for today. We would like to encourage you to keep your microphones on mute at all times to avoid any feedback during the presentation. Please disable any AI note-taking that you may have enabled on your Zoom account. If you do need accommodations, please let us know in the chat. You can always send us a private message. This webinar will be recorded and posted to youtube.com/Alabama Possible. If you wish to refer back to the recording, you may also submit any questions throughout the webinar using the chat feature. We will have time to read them throughout the presentation and towards the end. And for our educators who are joining us today to receive professional development credits, we really encourage you to answer those poll questions towards the end, because that is how we will track the amount of time that you are on the webinar for the PD credit. We also want you to share your commitment to building a college-going culture on social media. You can always tag us at AL Goes to College, and you can use any of the following hashtags on the screen to tag us and show us what your commitments are. The Alabama Goes to College has 3 campaign components. The Cash for College, which is our main focus for today. The Cash for College goal is for every graduating senior to complete the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid before they graduate from high school, so that they can access federal, state, and institutional aid to pay for their education after high school. The second component is the Alabama College Application Week. The Alabama College Application Week is part of a national effort to increase the number of first-generation college students and students of low-income families pursuing a college degree or higher education credential. The primary purpose of this effort is to help your high school seniors navigate the complex college application and admissions process to ensure they apply to at least one post-secondary institution. And then the third, College and Career Decision Day. With College and Career Decision Day, it celebrates students committing to pursue their education past high school, whether it is to obtain a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, a certificate, or an industry-recognized credential, or enter the military, or pursue a skills trade. Just a reminder, if you just joined us, don't forget to check if your school is registered for the Alabama Goes to College campaign. You can always sign up for your school at the alabamapossible.org/register 2025 to 26 link. You may also check to see if your school is already registered in the other link. I believe may already drop that in there for you. You may check to see if your high school is registered by looking in alphabetical order. So May, we'll go ahead and launch a poll question. How comfortable are you with the FAFSA?
We know y'all self-selected to join this beginner session today, but even so, we still just want to understand how you would describe your level of familiarity and comfortability, so we can give us a better sense of the resources that y'all might need throughout this academic year. I'm gonna give it about all right, so the majority of you are about the middle, so somewhat comfortable. And then we have 21% right above that at quite comfortable, and 21% right below that at slightly comfortable. So that just gives us a good idea. Thank you.
The agenda for today, we will go over what is the FAFSA and why should your students and their families complete it. What are some steps to prepare for and complete the FAFSA, and what are some of the key updates for the 2026 to 27 FAFSA. So, a lot again, like May was telling us, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And I'm sure a lot of you opted to, join the beginner webinar today. You may or may have not heard of the FAFSA, but the free application for federal student aid is used to determine a student's eligibility for grants, scholarships, work study jobs, and low interest loans. Um, the 2026 to 27 FAFSA is currently open in beta 2 version, and is open for all students. The beta 2 version is really somewhat like a test period, where they're testing up bugs on the application. So we do encourage, if you want to hold on, especially if you're not too comfortable on the application, to avoid, any of like bugs that may make the application process a little bit harder for you. So, on the research done by National College Attainment Network, um, it shows that the percent of affordability for colleges in Alabama, it's at 73% for community colleges, and this includes the when students are using Pell Grants and work study as their a form of aid. So why should students complete the FAFSA? It access to many need-based aid options. So most of high school seniors in Alabama qualify for the Pell Grant aid, which is the max aid would be $7,395 per year, which Pell Grants do not need to be repaid back. The average cost of tuition and fees at a 2-year college in Alabama is around $5,039 per year. So if students most since most students qualify for Pell Grants, it makes going to community college a lot more affordable for the student. So types of federal aid. There is Pell Grants, which demonstrate financial need, which is again the max offer for Pell Grants if a student qualifies for the max is $7,395 per year. There is also federal supplemental ed opportunity grants, which demonstrate if a student has exceptional financial need. There is also the Iraq and Afghanistan service grant, and this grant is granted for students whose parents have passed serving. There's a Teach grant, and this grant is awarded for students who take courses and commit to a teaching career. I would definitely encourage the student to check with the financial aid office to see what are the requirements for that grant. There is also federal work study, which demonstrate financial need. Students work part-time, and students will have to apply through the campus for these job opportunities. There is also other financial aid types. There is federal direct subsidized loans, which it's for students who have some financial need. The government um, pays the interest while students are in school. And then there is federal direct subsidized loan, which no financial need is necessary from the student. The student is responsible for interest after the loans are paid out to the school. There are direct plus loans, which are often taken by parents or graduate students. These are higher interest rates for whoever takes out the loans. Aid for institutional study, for international study, I'm sorry. Students study abroad or getting a degree from an international school. And then there is aid for military families. So these aid types are awarded to students serving in the military or those who are related to someone who is active duty or a veteran. So the FAFSA also allows students to access other kinds of aid. So many non-federal grants or scholarships also require the FAFSA completion in order to determine financial need. And there have been like positive outcomes of completing the FAFSA, which is strongly associated with positive increase in enrollment and attainment in college. So why does this matter? More than 39% of Alabama's class of 2025 did not complete the FAFSA, which means that they forfeited on millions of dollars of free federal aid available for them to pursue their post-secondary pursuits. Earlier, during the start of the webinar, I mentioned that we will really focus on the student part of the application, mostly because we want to get into very, in-depth details of the application, assuming that you all are beginners and want to learn more on the concepts and basically the language on the application. So we will focus on steps 1 to 3 on the completing the application. So step 1, creating FSA IDs. Step 2, gathering the documents that the students are going to need. And step 3, students fill out their sections of the applications. So who is a contributor? This is a very important question to ask a student or ask yourselves when the student is going to fill out an application. It's one of the first questions that it should be brought up. Contributors are any individuals required to provide consent and approval for federal tax information along with their signature on the FAFSA form, including the student's spouse, a biological or adoptive parent, or the parent's spouse, which is a step parent. Again, important FAFSA questions to ask before a student starts the application. Is the student a independent or a dependent student? And if the student is a dependent student, who would be the contributor on the FAFSA? So step 1, the FSA ID. What is an FSA ID, right? The FSA ID is a username and password for accessing the federal student aid account. An FSA ID is required to start the FAFSA form. Good news is that now the FSA ID is real-time matched through the Social Security Administration. So students and the contributors will not have to wait for authentication if FSA ID of the FSA ID and the Social Security number match. Meaning that they, in the past, even last year, maybe if you've already worked with students in applications, the time between creating an FSA ID and starting the application was a 1 to 3 day waiting period. Now students are able to start the application as soon as they create those FSA IDs, starting with the 26 to 27 FAFSA application. And a verified email address is required. So they do not do, so we definitely encourage students to not use the shared email or a temporary like work or school email address. We always encourage students and their contributors to use their personal email because this is the account that students will have to use for the application every time they renew it. And if they need to go back after, they graduate, this is the FSA ID account that they will use. And they would, if by any chance they need to retrieve a password, they will need that email account, access to that email account in order to go back into and change the password. So we have created some resources for you all to use when you're encouraging your students to create an FSA ID. We do have this handout in the Educators Toolkit. The handout really has the link to where students can go in and start the application or register for their FSA ID. It lets them know that what they will need. So like date of birth, social security number, home address, personal email, and phone number. The phone number is it's optional before creation of the application, but definitely that personal email address is very important. When you create the FSA ID account, it also reminds them to enter their name and social security number exactly how they appear on the social security card, because if by any chance the name in the social security card does not match, the number on the card does not match, it may create problems with the FSA ID account creation. And if the social security number does match with the name of the student, then that is when the account is instantly verified and successful, and meaning and they're able to use it immediately. It also has an option like the a space for students to write down the username and password that they have created for the account. It does remind them that they have to use a certain amount of characters and length to create the password. And it also gives a space for students to write down the email and phone number that they use for the account. On for question number 4, it says it choose your security question, so it allows them to write that down. And it also has a space to for students to write a multi-factor authentication number that they will receive towards the end of the FSA ID account creation. And this authentication code can be used to log in into the account if by any chance the email address or the phone number they cannot retrieve passwords or their account using that method. So who else needs the FSA ID? I previously mentioned the contributors. So some students will need to invite people. So in some instances, they might need to invite their spouse or their parent to contribute information to the FAFSA. So these contributors will also need the FSA ID. So who contributes to the student's FAFSA really depends on the student's dependency status. And the dependency status is determined by a student's response to the set of questions, which we will, yes, thank you. There is a list of questions. So the list of questions for dependency status on 26 to 27 school year would be, were you born before January 1st of 2003? As of today, are you married? At the beginning of 26 and 27 school year, will you be enrolled in the master's or doctorate program? Are you currently serving in active duty in the U.S. Army Forces for purposes other than training? Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Do you have any children or other people, including your spouse, who live with you and who received more than half of their support from you now and between July 1st, 2026 and June 30th of 2027? At any time since you turned the age of 13, were you an orphan, meaning no living biological or adoptive parent? At any time since you turned age 13, were you a ward of the court? At any time since you turned 13, were you foster care? Are you or were you legally an emancipated minor as determined by the court in your state of residence? Are you or were you in a legal guardianship with someone other than your parent or step parent as determined by the court in your state of residence? At any time on after July 1st, 2025, were you unaccompanied or either homeless or self-supporting or the risk of being homeless?
So we put this on the slide here so that y'all can see all of the questions in one go. If a student answers yes to any of these questions, then they are considered an independent student for the purposes of the FAFSA. So if they answer yes to even just one of these, they'll be considered independent. When the student is actually going through the application, and you'll see this in the screenshots that we have on future slides, it's going to ask them these questions across several different screens. So if you want to just be proactive and have your students look at this set of questions in advance of starting their FAFSA to get an idea of whether they're dependent or independent, this would just be the easiest way to do it. In When students are high school seniors, most of them are going to be dependent students, meaning they will have to provide parent information. But this is just a good way to screen really quickly before a student even starts the FAFSA.
Ellis needs to create an FSCID. As May was saying, independent students, whoever answered yes to the questions that previously were read, the student and the student spouse, if the student is married, they will need to also have a FSCID. Dependent students, and parents. So the parent that creates an FSCID and reports their information will depend on several factors. We have two ways to kind of help you determine on which parent needs to create an FSAID. And one of them is a flow chart. Sorry, the flow chart is on here. So it basically asks the first three questions. Um, are your biological or adoptive parents married to each other? The student will answer yes, and then if the student answers yes, it'll just tell them that your parents' marital status is married, so not separated, or both of your parents' information must be included in the FAFSA form. If the answer is no, then they will ask themselves, do your biological or adoptive parents live together? So they will determine if yes or no. And if yes, then the parents' marital status is unmarried. So both legal parents are living together, and both of your parents are contributors. If the answer is no, then it goes to a third question that says, uh, did one parent provide more financial support than other than the other over the past 12 months? And then the student will determine if the answer is yes or no. So if the answer is yes, the individual information and consent and approval and signature of the parent who provided more financial support over the past 12 months will require to be on the FAFSA form. So then they will both answer, like, it has the parent remarried like if the parent has married or remarried, then if the answer is yes, then it will tell them that the parent's marital status is married or remarried, and the step parent who will also um, be identified as a contributor on the FAFSA form. Um, is also another way to determine or use how to determine the contributor on the FAFSA application, and this is the parent wither tool, which is also another way for students to kind of determine who is considered a contributor on the application. Just a reminder that when you're kind of determining who is the legal parent on the application, there is a box that you could click on there that says who is considered a legal parent, and just a reminder that it is a biological parent or an adoptive parent that the student may have. If the student only has one legal parent, they will click on the box that says continue, and they will ask a series of questions following, like, if the parent is married, or and then if the parent has remarried, like, it'll just break it down really well for the student to determine who would be the contributor on the application. So May will go over some scenario questions with you all. If May, you're ready.
Sure, yeah. I'm just gonna revisit this really quickly because I think this flowchart gives a pretty important note. So, like Sierra Mara was mentioning, we're starting from this framework where we're considering a legal parent to be either a biological or adoptive parent. So, that's not including a step parent unless the step parent has adopted the student. And then, believe the flowchart also, actually, this one doesn't. But let's go ahead and just do a couple scenarios to see how this plays out. So, scenario one, Daniel's parents are divorced. Daniel lives with his mother, Stephanie, and stepfather, Oscar. Daniel's father, Mark, provides most of Daniel's financial support. Daniel sees his father, Mark, once a month. Mark is not remarried. So I am going to stop sharing my screen here in just a moment, and I'm going to pull up the wizard tool so we can go through this together. So I'm going to let everyone read that one more time and let it really sink in. All right, so now I am sharing the wizard tool. So when we answer this first question where we provide the parents' names, like Santa Mara was mentioning, we have this little help text, who is considered a legal parent, and it's reminding us that that's the biological or adoptive parent. So we know that Daniel's biological parents are Stephanie and Mark. So then it's going to ask us some questions. Are they married to each other? No. So they're divorced. Do Stephanie and Mark live together? No. And then it asks us which parent provided more financial support for the student over the past 12 months. Well, we know from the scenario that Mark did. So even though the student lives with Stephanie and Stephanie's new spouse, the FAFSA is only caring about who provided more financial support. So we click Mark and it asks us if Mark remarried, and no, Mark didn't. So the wizard tool is going to tell us that the student will need to invite Mark to contribute to the FAFSA. If Mark doesn't already have an FSA ID, then Mark will need to create one in order to contribute. And when Mark fills out his portion of the FAFSA, so the parent portion, he's going to report his current marital status as single. But that also includes like that he is divorced but now single. So since Mark provides more financial support, he's going to be the one that contributes. So you might have students who think that, oh, just because I'm living with this parent more out of the year, that's whose information I should provide, but that's simply not the case. The FAFSA asks very specific questions to determine who is the parent for the purposes of the FAFSA. And then just a reminder, when we're using the wizard tool, we don't start out by putting Stephanie and the stepfather, Oscar, because Oscar is not legally adopted Daniel. So we put the two biological parents. So, scenario two, Trey has been living with his grandmother ever since his mom and dad got divorced. Trey's grandmother has not legally adopted him and is not his legal guardian as determined by a court. Trey's grandmother provides most of Trey's financial support, and then Trey's mom contributes the rest. So we have a situation where a student is living with a grandparent, but that grandparent's not legally adopted the student. And we don't have names here, but we know the student. We're going to put mom and dad. Are the parents married to each other? So no, we know they got divorced. Do the parents live together? We're going to assume no. And then which parent provided more financial support? So we were told that actually the grandmother is providing most of the students' financial support, but outside of that grandmother's support, the mom is providing the rest. And to our knowledge, the mom did not remarry. So only the mom is going to contribute. So here's another situation where we have a student living with a particular family member, and that even though that family member is also providing most of the financial support, the student is still going to report the mom as the FAFSA parent. All right, so Trey's mom is going to contribute to the FAFSA. If she doesn't already have an FSA ID, then she will create one in order to contribute. Scenario three, John's parents, Sarah and Rob, are married. They file taxes separately. All right, so we have Sarah and Rob. Now they are married to each other. So let's see what it tells us. So both Sarah and Rob are considered parents on the FAFSA form. The student will need to invite only one parent to the FAFSA, so Sarah or Rob. Um, and if one parent already has an FSA ID, then the easiest thing is just to invite that parent who already has the FSA ID. But he can invite either. The parent should report their marital status as married, and then it gives us notes about the taxes. So if the parent filed taxes jointly, then only one parent is required as a contributor, and they'll be reporting on behalf of both of the parents. But because we know that this student's parents did not file their taxes jointly, they filed separately, then both parents are actually going to have to contribute to the FAFSA form. So the first parent will be invited by the student, and then the next parent will invite the second parent. So actually, both of them are going to need FSA IDs, and both of them are going to need to contribute because they file their taxes separately. So, scenario four, Hope's parents are divorced. She splits her time evenly between them. Hope's mother, Sasha, earns $55,000 a year. Hope's father, Jim, earns $41,000 per year. Per the divorce settlement, each parent is required to provide one half of Hope's support. Neither parent are remarried. So we have a student with divorced parents. She spends her time evenly between them. The parents have different levels of income, but despite that, they're both contributing, they're both covering half of the student's expenses. All right, we have parents Sasha and Jim. Are they married to each other? No. Do they live together? No. And then which parent provided more financial support? So they're actually providing even support. So we don't have an answer for this. So we got to read the follow-up test text. If both parents provided an equal amount of financial support, then select the parent with the greater income and assets. So we know that Sasha's income is higher. So we're going to click Sasha. Did Sasha remarry? No. So Sasha is going to contribute to the student's FAFSA. If Sasha does not have an FSA ID already, then she will need to create one in order to be able to contribute. So because they're providing equal support, we actually have to ask the follow-up question, who has the greater income and assets? And because Sasha has the higher income, she is going to contribute. We try to cover a range of living situations, knowing that that was one of the questions that y'all submitted during registration, and just knowing that students in Alabama have all kinds of living situations. Unfortunately, the FAFSA is pretty rigid in who it considers to be the FAFSA parent, so it's definitely worthwhile utilizing the wizard tool or the flow chart, whichever makes more sense to your brain. But just going through each of those questions very carefully and understanding who exactly the FAFSA wants. But yeah, I'm not going to turn it back over to Ciamara.
So as May was experimenting with the parent wizard tool, um, the parent wizard tool will tell you who the student needs to invite in the parent invitation section of the FAFSA. The student is only going to invite one parent. Um, and in some scenarios, you saw that a second parent might need to be invited. The first parent will need to invite the second parent. So the student only has to worry about inviting one parent on the application, an invitation, and that parent will invite the second parent if needed. In the case where students can invite either parents to contribute, the students will choose the parent who already has the FSA ID, as May was talking about earlier. Parents without social security numbers, including undocumented parents, will also need a FSA ID for this FAFSA application. They will need to check a box indicating that do not have a social security number. It is very important that the parent does not use the ITIN number, which is an individual taxpayer identification number, instead of a social security number on the FAFSA, the FSA ID creation. And we'll see a screenshot of what it looks like when the parents are creating the account. They will click on I do not have a social security number. Is for the parents that are that do not have a social security number, instead of authenticating their through the Social Security Administration, these parents verify their identity through TransUnion, which they use a series of verification questions towards the kind of like the end of the FSAID creation process. If the questions are answered correctly, their identity is verified. If the verification questions are not presented, In this year, they will not require to do any additional steps. Their account will be identified. They will be able to use their account immediately after the creation of the account, and they will be able to start the FAFSA application as anyone else. Oh, just a reminder too, the students or the parents who do not have a social security number, um, they will have to manually input their financial information since there is no they're not able to use the direct data that we will talk about later on in the presentation. The only time that a dependent student does not have to provide parent information is if the student has unusual circumstances. The unusual circumstances allow dependent students to receive a provisional student aid index provided parent parental without providing parent information. The student will have to follow up with colleges where they have applied to provide the documentation. They will have to do interviews, phone calls, or present court documents to prove that they cannot get parent information. And pro- some of the provisions that like the questions, if the student does have an unusual circumstance that prevents a student from contacting their parents, or would contacting their parents pose a risk to the students. And some of the questions are, if the student is experiencing unusual circumstances, they have left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, are abandoned by or estranged from their parents, have refugee or asylee status, and are separated from their parents, or their parents are displaced in a foreign country. They are a victim of human trafficking, are incarcerated, or their parents are incarcerated, and contact with parents would pose a risk to the student, or are otherwise unable to contact or locate their parent. So if the student's circumstances um, result in not having safe or stable place to live, they may be considered homeless youth, or should review the answers to previous questions about being an unaccompanied and a homeless student. So they will answer yes or no to the questions if these apply to the student. So we have a moment to pause for any questions. You can always drop your questions in the chat if there are any.
I'm not seeing any yet, but we know that it's a lot of information to take in, so we just wanted to give some time. But essentially, what we tried to just cover are these two big important FAFSA questions. So, am I an independent or dependent student? And then, if I am a dependent student, who is considered my parent for the purposes of the FAFSA? So, it is a lot, but I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so we can proceed forward.
So step two, what documents the student and their families may need for the application? We do have a checklist that we've also have handy in our educators toolkit that you can use to share with your students and families. And it has all of like the determination of if the student is an independent or dependent student. It has all the questions that, helps them determine if the student is independent or dependent. And they'll also have a list of financial information that the student may need and the families may need. So the application, the 2026 to 27 FAFSA is used to apply for financial aid for fall semester of 2026 through summer semester of 2027. The current 2025 to 2026 FAFSA is used to apply for financial aid for fall semester 2025 through summer semester of 2026. Sometimes students, it may be a little confusing, but it is important for students to check with their colleges, and really depending on what semester the students are going to go to school, to, determine what application the students will use to apply for financial aid. So if doubt, just it is very important to ask the colleges which application to complete for financial aid for summer semesters, if the student is planning to do a summer semester, because it really depends on the college to see which of these applications they will be using. So after students create their FSA IDs, they might want they're sometimes they're like, okay, let's start the application. So make sure that they don't start at 2025 to 2026 FAFSA if they're going to start in the semester that that application does not fall under. So the landing page for the FAFSA application, students are directed to the start new form or editing a existing form. Um, they'll see like the new application on the top, and then if students are needing to do the 25 to 26 FAFSA form, it has an option down at the bottom where they can start that application. You'll also see a third option where it says accept an invitation for 25 to 27 FAFSA form, and that is for the parent. It will, and we will talk about it if you join our advanced FAFSA webinar. We will get more into detail on this, but the once the student sends an invitation to the parent, it generates a code, and that is where they can go ahead and enter that code. The parent can enter that code to access the student's application.
And we are recommending for students to start the FAFSA. So basically, they have the choice of the student starting or the parent starting, and we are recommending that the student start. It will be a faster process if the student starts and invites their parent.
If the student is not logged in into the studentaid.gov, they will be taken to, after they click on start the application, they'll be taken to a login page where they enter their credentials, so their username and password to access the FAFSA form. All students are required to have an FSA ID, and the parents themselves to start the application. Sometimes we've had parents where they're like, I cannot access the application. They also need a FSA ID account to be able to complete their portion of the application. So after logging in, the student, assuming that, we're mostly focused today on the student version of the application, and because we are also encouraging students to start the application, the after logging in, this is what the student will see, and the student will select as their role as the student. After they selected their role, the student will see this first page where they where it has like student identity information. If student needs to update any personal information, the student must access their account settings on studentaid.gov, and the updates that they can do on their email address, mobile phone number, physical address, and the student selects the state from the drop-down box to provide the month and year in which they became a resident of the state. In previous years, especially if you worked with the FAFSA last year, a lot of the question stated students' legal state of residence. So the word legal has been removed because it did cause a lot of confusions to some families, or kind of hesitation on the question. So now the question reads state, the student's state of residence, and the student will select the state and the date that they became a resident of the state. And then it'll lead to student provides consent and approval for federal tax information. So this is only if, if applicable, and you'll see later on some screenshots. But some, like if students have have filed taxes, there's a data tool that will transfer the tax information from the IRS to the student. Um, but they will need to provide consent and approval. If they don't provide consent and approval, the application will be considered incomplete. So the student provides consent and approval whether or not they file taxes. The system notifies the student if tax information was imported or if no data was found. Assuming that most students, especially at the high school, senior high school students, um, a lot of times they don't file taxes, so they might get a notification that says, sorry, data cannot be retrieved. Select continue to proceed. That is perfectly fine and it's normal because they do not have any tax information for the student. So the student will be able to continue if even if that notification pops up. So the direct data exchange transfers an individual's federal tax information from the Internal Revenue Service to the Department of Education. Again, the student must provide consent and approval for the system to check for any tax records. Contributors must also provide consent and approval. The transferred information will not be seen anywhere on the front end of the form. Without consent, the FAFSA is considered incomplete and the student is not eligible for the federal aid. So it is very important, like for students to provide consent and approval. The FAFSA uses prior year tax information. So that means that taxes from 2 years before the year that the aid is received. So for the 26 to 27 FAFSA, the FAFSA will use the 2024 tax return filed in 2025. We recommend that families, although there is this direct data exchange tool, we definitely recommend families have access to their tax returns and supporting documents for reference for additional questions. And of course, those in students that have undocumented parents, I'm sorry, they will need those tax returns to manually input tax information on the forms. Personal circumstances. So the personal circumstances section determines if the student is a dependent or a student. So needs to provide parent information or independent student that does not need to provide parent information. So the student selects their marital status, and they'll just go ahead and select that. The student is asked about their college grade level for the 26 to 27 school year. The student will select the first year if they have not received their first bachelor's degree. And they will select that they have not received their first bachelor's degree. It is also important to remind students that they must enter first year even if they have um, any dual enrollment credit because they are still considered first year freshmen in college. The student will be asked if any of the listed personal circumstances apply to them and if the student has if the student's personal circumstances do not apply, they will select none of these apply. The student will be asked if they were homeless or at risk of being homeless, and they will select yes or no on here. If the student selects yes, they will be asked if a specific program determines the student as homeless. So they will select yes, and then they'll have the list of questions, and they will click on whichever applies to them. The only time that dependent students do not have to provide parent information is if the student has unusual circumstances. The unusual circumstances allow dependent students to receive a provisional student aid index without providing parental information. The student will have to follow up with the colleges where they have applied to provide documentation. So again, like interviews, phone calls, um, court documents to prove that they cannot get parent information.
I just want to reiterate here, so we're talking about all these reasons that might allow a student to not provide parent info. So I just want to go back for these couple slides with homelessness. So this is one of the questions to determine dependency. And a lot of y'all might be working with McKinney-Vento in your school. I just want to note for the FAFSA that it's asking for more than just homeless status. So it's asking if the student is both unaccompanied and homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. So that unaccompanied piece is pretty important for the FAFSA. It's making sure that a student isn't in the physical custody of their parent or guardian. So if you're pretty familiar with McKinney-Vento at your school, just know that it's asking about homelessness and whether they're unaccompanied. And then if you have your district homeless liaison who's already made that determination for a student, then they would be the one that you would indicate here that has made the determination. But essentially, when a student selects that they are homeless, there's going to need to be some kind of documentation that they can provide to the college. So one of these people can do that. And then, similar with unusual circumstances, which is we're just reiterating what Ciamara had already mentioned in the past. But if the student is following under any of these unusual circumstances, they're also going to have documentation to provide to the college. And you as a counselor or a career coach or educator can be the one who like builds these records and documentation on behalf of the student. But just know that is like a pretty important piece of proving their status to the college.
In this scenario, the student is determined to be dependent and must provide parent information. So the student can indicate if the parents refuse to provide information. In that case, the college will determine a student's eligibility for direct unsubsidized loan only. This is not ideal, and should be used very if really needed. The student will be asked about demographic information that is used for research purposes only and does not impact aid eligibility. So there was a change to gender questions. So now students have to pick from what is the student's sex, and then it only has male or female options. The student is asked about their citizenship status. So for FAFSA students, have to be the student that is going to receive the FAFSA Pell Grants. They have to be a US citizen, a US national, and an eligible non-citizen to receive federal student aid. The link on this slide, which you will receive, will have more information on who is considered an eligible non-citizen.
And if y'all have students who are immigrants and you want to check their eligibility with us, please feel free to reach out. We're going to go into pretty great depth into this at a later webinar, but just knowing that you're right now trying to instruct students whether or not to complete a FAFSA, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to check with us.
The student will be asked about their high school completion status, which will be when they start the 26 to 27 school year. They will select high school diploma. So the student will enter state and city after clicking search. They will select their high school. They must select the correct high school in order for educators to track FAFSA completion for their students. So making sure that they do click on the correct high school, because I know there's a few same name high schools around the state, so make sure that they select the correct one. So the financials, the student is asked about their tax filing status. Students can determine if they have a tax filing requirement. You can go and on this link, you'll be able to review table 1 and 2 on page 9 to help kind of determine if the student is required to file taxes. Then the student will be asked a series of questions about their taxes, income, and other financial information. The student will enter this amount in whole dollar amounts in their responses. The students will be asked about their assets for the 26 to 27 cycle. Some changes have been implemented under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which have already, like, you can see explanations under like the general questions. You'll see explanations on what to include and what not to include. And the changes have been already implemented because I know that the act starts kind of like in between the FAFSA cycles. So they went ahead and made the changes before so that the students don't have to go back and make corrections to the application. So beginning with the 26 to 27 award year, the following should not be reported: the net worth of family-owned business with 100 or fewer full-time employees, the net worth of farms on which the family resides, and net worth of commercial fishing businesses and related expenses owned and controlled by the family. The student is asked to search for colleges that they would like their FAFSA information to go to. The student can search for a school by entering the state, city, or school name on the search, and then they can click search on there. Um, a student must add at least one college to continue. If the student cannot find the college that they're looking for, they can also enter a school code, and you'll see a, like, besides where it says search by state, you'll see where the student can enter school code for the school that they cannot find. A lot of times you can find that code via the school financial aid office or online. They have those schools codes available for the student. So the student can send their FAFSA information up to 20 schools. The students are encouraged to send their information to any college that they are considering applying to, so that they don't have to go back and like enter or add more schools. For the Once like the students are applying, they can enter up to 20 schools, but they could always go back and enter more schools if needed after. So here's an overview of what the invite to a parent as a contributor section looks like for a dependent student. So you'll see the invite a parent as a contributor. So it like reminds the student that it must be a legal parent, a biological or adoptive parent determined by the state. And it also reminds students that sick parents or other types of guardians do not count unless they have legally adopted the student. And then it has the option for students to see who counts as the parent for the FAFSA form. The student will be asked to enter their parent's email address to invite the parent to the FAFSA. A dependent student should only invite the parent indicating by the FAFSA. So again, like the student can click on who is the parent, who would be the contributor for the application. They will only need to add one parent on the invite. The email address does not have to match the parent's FSA ID account. The good thing is especially if you worked with students filling the FAFSA application last year, um, students do not need to have all of the information like date of birth, social security number. Students will only need the email address to invite parents to the FAFSA to contribute to the FAFSA. So again, the students invite their parents to contribute. They will only need an email address. The email address does not have to be the email address that the contributor uses when creating the FSA ID account. When the invitation generates, it generates a 7-digit code, which the contributor will be using to access the application. The 7-digit code will be emailed to both the student and the email address used on the parent contributor invitation. There are 3 ways that you can kind of like look up the code. So the student will have options to copy a special invite code, and the code will also be used. The code will also be found in the student dashboard. So the student will have the code on their dashboard. The student will receive an email with the 7-digit code, and then the parent will also if the whatever email address that the student used, the parent that email address will also have the 7-digit code. So towards the end, you'll see the review page. The review page displays the responses to the student has provided in the FAFSA form. The student can review all the responses by selecting expand all or expand each section individually. To edit a response, the student can select the question's hyperlink to be taken to the corresponding page. So students will definitely want to review the questions before they continue, or if they need to edit any questions before they submit it, they can go ahead and do so in this. Here's the signature. On this page, the student reviews the terms and conditions of the FAFSA and what they'll agree to if they sign the form. And this is a very important part because if without a signature, the application is considered incomplete. So after agreeing to the terms and conditions and signing, the student can submit their section. So for a dependent student, the parent information has to be provided for the FAFSA to be considered complete and then get processed. So dependent students, they have to sign it for part one to be complete, and then of course wait for their parents to provide their portions of the questions for the FAFSA to be completely complete and processed. So a dependent student is reminded that their FAFSA is incomplete. That and can't be submitted until the parent completes the contributor section of the form and signs it. This page also displays next steps for the students to take, and it includes tracking and managing their form. So you'll see a screenshot on here where it says pending submission, check with your contributor. It reminds them that they have to get their parents to fill out their portion of the form to consider a completed application. It'll display who the student invited as a contributor, the invite code that generated after sending the invitation, and it'll tell them like the next steps that they have to take to get the application completed. So yeah, do we have any questions so far? I
Yeah,
think.
we can take a brief moment for questions, and then we'll have another opportunity as well towards the end. But we know this is a lot of information, and we did just want to cover the student portion so that y'all feel confident in getting that first half of the FAFSA done with our dependent student. I know I saw one question in the chat asking about the resources. So we'll have all of these slides sent out to you in our follow-up email. You'll be able to click the links from there. And then many of the resources are contained within our educator toolkit. So all of those will be under the Cash for College folder. And then there's many subfolders within that. I know that the sheer volume of resources might be overwhelming, so we'll have a toolkit takeaway video that'll be 5 minutes or so coming out later this week to kind of guide you through the most important resources. So if you're new to this work, we're trying to break it down and make it as simple as possible, but we'll get that out to y'all later this week. But now I have the honor of bringing on one of our award-winning educators. So, like Ciamara mentioned, at the end of the year, we give out awards to schools that have either the highest FAFSA completion rate or the most improved FAFSA completion rate. And this year we get to hear from our MVP winners. So I'm now going to turn it over to Kim Counts, who was one of our MVPs last year, just to talk about all the stuff going on in her school and what she has looking forward to the class of 2026. All yours, Kim.
Thank you. Good morning. You can go to the next slide. That's just the title page, if you will. So last year was my first year here at Dadeville, and I had worked with them the year before on the FAFSAs. And um, when I got the job as counselor, then I said, well, I need to know actually what the seniors were told and that kind of thing. So we set up meetings in September of last year to talk about all the dates that are coming up and what needed to be done. And in that meeting, we talked about the FAFSA IDs and that we would um, have a day that the kids would do theirs here at school, and then the parents would need to do one as well. We met with 15-minute intervals, talked to them about it, and we had really good results. Gave them the link. They went home. They created their own FSA ID. That was, of course, prior to October 1st. In the classes, we met with the kids and they did their FAFSA IDs as well. So when October 1st came, we didn't actually sit down with them to do their FAFSAs at that time. We allowed them to work on it, but and they did. We had pretty good turnout for them completing it on their own. Of course, if they had questions, we were available for them to come and ask or come and sit down and just do it here with me if need be. So we also, you can flip the slide. Um, that's kind of hard to read, but I started a what I call a FAFSA frenzy. Just made that up myself about 10 or so years ago when I was at a different school. Um, and there's a picture that goes along with that, but I didn't put it on there because it's not so good. But I would get donations from our local representative, and I would buy things for them, like different things that they could use in their dorm rooms or apartments or wherever they were going to live when they got out of high school. And then if they met the deadline for the completing the FAFSA that I gave them, which last year was in December, um, we put their names in a hat, and then we drew them out and gave them those items. And we did things like microwaves and toasters and coffee pots and down to towels and shower curtains and whatever. Um, and then the day that we did that, last year we went on a college and career fair trip, and we came back from that, and then we went on in the auditorium and we did our frenzy at that time. So we were already together. But I'm going to do that again this year with the frenzy. Also, I'm thinking of I saw somewhere, I think in one of these presentations, somebody did a FAFSA and food truck type thing. I think we're going to try that this year, but we're going to do it all during college application week. We're going to start in the mornings. We're going to do, which is our fall break week. So we're only here for Thursday and Friday. But on Thursday morning, we're going to do college applications. We're going to just be in the auditorium all day or most of the day. And then we'll have a time for FSA IDs. And then we're going to have parents come in, since this is real time, and complete them that afternoon. And then their food trucks will be waiting to pick up their vouchers and stuff outside when they go back. So a lot of things going on, but
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Love the ideas. And I've always, it's so unique hearing giving out prizes that are going to be supporting them after they leave home and are off in a new place. So I think that's great. Feel free to all of our attendees to drop questions in the chat if you have them for Kim. We have a few slides after this, but we'll make time for more questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim, for sharing your experience and ideas. So some key messages for students to encourage them to fill out the FAFSA. It is important to remind them that the FAFSA is free to complete. FAFSA is available for technical and professional certificates and academic degrees. Students, it is important to remind them that they can be eligible up to $7,395 per year in Pell Grants. It is important to remind them that many non-federal grants and scholarships do require the FAFSA completion. So even if they think they're not eligible for Pell Grants, they will need to file a FAFSA for other grants or scholarships that may require it. And also be aware of scholarship and FAFSA priority deadlines at the colleges that the students are applying.
And if y'all have an opportunity to give an assignment to your students over the next couple weeks, a great one would be to create their FSA ID and then also to know all of the priority deadlines for each college that they're interested in. So it's totally going to depend on the college. It might be December, it might be March, but just having an idea of that so they know when they for sure need to have their FAFSA done um, if they want to be eligible for as many aid opportunities as possible.
Some key messages for parents. It is important to remind to parents that FAFSA is safe and secure using the studentaid.gov website. It is only used to determine the student's eligibility for financial aid. Um, the student needs to help the student will need help getting key information from the parent to complete the application. And again, like if the family thinks that they do not qualify for aid, it is very important for them to have it on file, especially again, like if the student needs it for scholarships, or in case of the unexpected. So Power School for FAFSA completion, um, students should start out with no option selected. So the three options to select it would be no waiver, which is F01. Once the student, and that should be selected once the student has completed their FAFSA and will not be filing a waiver. The parent waiver, which is a code F02 or direct waiver F03, should be selected once a student has a waiver on file. And they should you should upload the waiver according to the district's instructions. A waiver is only encouraged for students who cannot file a FAFSA application. And a lot of times this would be the like undocumented students that cannot file FAFSA.
Just in the future, we are going to have some Power School reps on our FAFSA related webinars. So if y'all have any Power School related questions, be sure to sign up for those future training opportunities. We just kind of wanted to give a brief highlight right now. And we did get some questions about this at our in-person event yesterday. So this section is under AL Custom, the compliance section. We're not Power School experts, so not sure what that looks like for you, but we'll definitely have some experts on the line with us next opportunity.
Some resources for you all, especially if you don't feel very comfortable with the application. There is the 26 to 27 FAFSA prototype, which is a demo version of the application. So we will have the link and the access code that you can go ahead and try different scenarios. It is very similar to the application. So we would definitely encourage you to kind of put in some practice on there if you're not comfortable with the application. Some resources that we have available. So our Cash for College Toolkit, which is the alabamapossible.org/educators toolkit. Our partners at the National College Attainment Network has amazing resources. So they have a training toolkit available for you all to use. And then there is also the Federal Student Aid Hotline that you can call. We do encourage you all to call us if you have any questions, but the Federal Student Aid Hotline is also available for any questions that you may have. So some save the dates. Friday, September 19th is Why Apply Day. We will send more information on we will send the link where you can read about why Apply Day. We do have the FAFSA Advanced FAFSA Beginner webinar on Tuesday, November 18th at 10:30 a.m. For those that want to attend the Advanced FAFSA Experienced webinar, it will be on Wednesday, November 19th. And then on Wednesday, December 3rd, we will have our Cash for College Navigating Financial Aid for Immigrant Families. And this is mostly when students have undocumented parents, but the students are eligible for filling the FAFSA application. Any additional questions?
We got a couple questions in the chat, so I was just going to read those aloud, even though we answered them there. So someone asked if the FAFSA is scheduled to open October 1st. So it's technically open now through beta testing. So we have a link in the slides that the student can click to take them to request access through the beta testing. They're certainly welcome to do that, but you can just, if you'd like, you can wait until October 1st with the big launch. Hopefully a lot of the technical issues will be resolved by the big October 1st launch. And then someone asked, will the state of Alabama be giving any extra grants? So our state-based aid programs do require a FAFSA to determine eligibility. So that's why we really recommend that everyone complete a FAFSA. It's not just for federal aid, it's also to be considered for state-based aid, as well as institutional aid and even aid from local scholarship organizations. A lot of them will use a FAFSA for that. In a future webinar, I think in our scholarships webinar, we might cover more state-based aid opportunities if that's of interest to y'all. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, and I do want to get to our professional development questions through the polls. We mentioned this at our in-person summit yesterday, but a big topic of conversation is how this will be done. So how creating the FSA ID and how completing the FAFSA will be done considering the statewide cell phone policy. If you have any ideas or questions, please feel free to give us your feedback via email. We're definitely interested in what y'all are doing to get around this. If you have super supportive administrators who are who are supporting you and getting your seniors access to their phones to be able to do the multi-factor authentication that they need to do to create their FSA ID and to complete their FAFSA. So we would just love your feedback, whether it's positive or negative, how the state cell phone policy is impacting y'all. The good thing is that students won't need to wait for their identity to be verified. It should be instant this year. So if they have their cell phone, it should be a very quick process having their name and social security number matched instantly with the Social Security Administration.
So we definitely encourage you to call us at our help desk line. I know it was a lot of information today, and sometimes it really depends on a student by student case. So if you have any questions, and the application process is not easy, feel free to call us. We are here to assist you and your students, families. So there's our phone number at 334-316-6155. You can also email us, which is the email is on the next slide. AL goes to college at alabamapossible.org. And you can also visit us at alabamagoestocollege.org on the website. We hope that you have taking something away with you and learn something, or taking a resource that you will be able to use. We are so happy to have Kim Counts present with us today and shared her story. And we hope to see you on our next webinars.